It was just about every single night we were making arrests on a regular basis, dozens, if not more, people in night, different smuggling events. If you don't go through that cartel and you were to try to do it on your own, you would be, kidnapped and beaten and robbed, things like that, to where they exert control over that area. Broken compound fractures, dehydration, heat exhaustion. Hundreds upon hundreds of times our agents are saving lives of people out there, or unfortunately not getting there soon enough and the person has already died out in the field. I can't tell you how many times folks have told us that they were sexually assaulted by their smugglers. People would send the kids back to go be used with another adult so that they could enter as a family and then be released, which subjected those kids to, God only knows what type of abuse.
My name is Justin Torre, Chief Patrol Agent of the San Diego sector. It's our intent to show the public factual information about the border environment, to demonstrate the realities of what our agents face every day along the border. Also to show the enforcement, the efforts that we are putting in to secure our communities and to keep dangerous threats from entering our country.
Welcome out to God and Country. I'm Uriah Kennedy. This is Ingrid Bettridge. We have a great guest on with us this week, all the way up from San Diego. This is Justin De La Torre. He's the Chief Patrol Agent in the San Diego office, and he's going to be joining us for a number of questions. We're going to really kind of get a good inspiration, a good feeling of what it's like on the ground at the border. No fluff, no skewing the message, no, there's no agendas. It's just straight up, this is what's happening out on the border. And lucky for us, Justin's been in the Border Patrol since he was 20 years old, so he's been in there for, 15, 18 years?
26 years.
26 years he's been on Border Patrol.
He's seen a lot of things.
So he's seen, I don't know, half a dozen administrations by this point and can know the differences, but we're going to get into a lot of detail, his experiences on the border, what he's seen on the ground, the violence, the cruelty, the significant suffering that's going on, the differences between the administrations, all that. So this is going to be a great podcast. Stay with us until the end. Like, subscribe, and share. Make sure you are helping us get out there. YouTube does not like anything conservative. Everybody knows that. And we want to get the message out there, as well as not just on YouTube, but on all our social media platforms. So if you're seeing us on our other media platforms, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, kind of share that out. Help us spread the word, and so we can get the honest picture out there. Look down below. Look at our T-shirts. Support the channel. Buy the T-shirts, and we're going to jump right into San Diego Border Patrol. So, Justin, kind of tell us how things got started. I mean, you were born and raised in the San Diego area, you were telling me, and then young age, 20 years old, you decided to join Border Patrol. What made you do that?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Charleston, South Carolina, but I grew up in San Diego here thanks to the Navy. My dad was in the Navy, stationed in Charleston, and then once he got out to San Diego, decided this was the place that he was going to raise our family. So, as long as I can remember as a kid, I wanted to be in law enforcement. I had an uncle who was a police officer here. One of my friend's dads was a police officer. And I think, too, watching TV, cops, Rescue 911, shows like that, gave me that interest in serving the public in a way that would be, providing protection to others or helping other people out. And so, I really honestly didn't know much about the Border Patrol. When I got out of high school, I started looking at the local police department. and found out that they didn't hire it until you're about 23 years old at the time. And I was, 18, 19, wanting to get a career going. I learned that the Border Patrol hired at 18. And so I applied when I was 19, hired when I was 20. I didn't really know a whole lot about the mission. I knew it was law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and that was about the extent of my knowledge getting into it. It wasn't until I went through the academy, the training, and then hit the ground out at the Imperial Beach Station, started making arrests, and realized the significance of our mission and truly protecting the security of our country as a whole.
Justin, that's why this is important. We have had several law enforcement and military and veterans on, and I end up in tears through most of the episode out of not only the stories, but the gratitude of understanding what it's really like. We think we know, like you said, watching TV shows and things. We think we know and we don't.
What people are actually going through.
What your life is like and how it affects your family and what your day-to-day is, that's your job. And I think it's important because Border Patrol, we know even less about. There's no real shows, what little the media has, I don't trust. We as citizens need to understand what the service you give and have a gratitude for how you help protect this country.
Was it just the age requirement that made you go into Border Patrol versus just like a police officer somewhere then?
Yeah, that was part of it, and just a desire to be in law enforcement. So I didn't know at that time that I would make a career out of it. It was about really getting a job in the field of law enforcement.
So why not San Diego PD or something like that? What?
That was it. I talked to their recruiters, and at the time, they didn't hire until 23 years old. And, when you're young and you want to get something going, like 23 seems like, it seemed like what many years.
Well, what are the duties like as an 18-year-old? What do they have you doing initially?
Well, it's the same as for anybody else that comes in. There's no distinction in your age. When you sign up, you go through about 6 months of training at the academy. For me, it was out in Glencoe, Georgia. Now all of our training is at our Artesia, New Mexico. You go through extensive training in immigration law, now customs law, federal general crimes, operational tactics, defensive tactics, use of force, vehicle pursuits, some really good quality law enforcement training that our agents get out there. And then when you get to the field, we have a field training program. You work closely with experienced agents who kind of show you the ropes. And that's when, I guess that's when it gets pretty real for you, because you learn quickly that this job does have tremendous risks and dangers that come with it. We're very well trained to carry out the job safely, but at the end of the day, an agent is getting out of their vehicle, getting into a canyon or a very remote area, oftentimes by themselves in the middle of the night, and confronting people that they don't know who they are. They don't know what kind of threat they present, and they have to make contact and arrest those people and bring them into custody and figure out what type of crime is going on.
And with as much cartel as on the border, that's got to be like scary. We all see officers just like pulling over random people for a speeding ticket, and all of a sudden bullets are flying, right? You're walking into a random canyon, and the vast majority of the time, I would assume you're intercepting people who are just trying to get to a better life, but they're all being guided by cartel people, and you got the drug trafficking element in there, all that. So that could be pretty dangerous at times, and not necessarily the safest thing to be alone there trying to do all that kind of stuff.
Right. You really just don't know who it is. You could look at the statistics and say, hey, well, 80 or 90% of the time the people are folks like you described that are coming here for economic purposes, but using the cartel to get here. And there's typically a foot guide with them. Typically, they're not armed. Sometimes they are. If they're bringing drugs, things like that, there's a higher likelihood that they will be armed. But you also have a number of people who have extensive criminal records in the United States who were deported, and now they're trying to sneak back in because that's the only way they could get in. They're never going to be eligible for lawful immigration because they've already proven not to be, good stewards of the community, or didn't have a lawful basis to be here to begin with, and committed additional crimes on top of that. So we do come across quite a few people like that as well.
So how much of your training would be similar to police officers, and how much it would be more similar to military?
I think, from a tactics standpoint, from the law enforcement use of force element of it, it's very similar to any police department. The unique element for us is studying immigration law, customs law, studying the federal law elements, and then applying that to the people that we come across.
So it is truly more law enforcement than military, because that's a big discrepancy. A lot of people think these guys are out there like ICE, just arresting willy-nilly. They're not obeying the law. They're acting like military. So you would say that the knowledge that the officers have to have of knowledge in law enforcement versus military is far more superior on the law enforcement side.
Yeah, we are a law enforcement agency. We're not a military branch, and we are affecting, we're executing the laws that we have the authority to execute. So, we make arrests based on probable cause. We stop vehicles based on reasonable suspicion. We adhere to, the Constitution and everything that we do. We swear the same oath to the country, to the Constitution, that every federal employee takes, and it's something that we really take to heart, that oath that we've committed to.
Yeah, also to uphold and sustain the Constitution. And the left, the people out there that are not really against immigration, they want to spread this narrative that you guys are going against all of that there's just there's no rules, that you guys are just grabbing people. I mean, ICE gets a bit worse rap than the Border Patrol, but you guys still get your fair share of it. And we want to dispel those type of bad information that's getting out there in the public and getting spread out there on social media, which is one of the reasons why we enjoy these moments, to be able to have people like you on the podcast. Going up through the ranks, how does that work, and what were your experiences going through 26 years of being on the Border Patrol?
It's been quite an adventure. Like I said, I started at 20 years old. I spent the first 7 years, patrolling the line on various different teams. I was with our sector's air mobile unit. I was with our sector's tactical unit, the BORTAC team here locally. And then patrolling the Imperial Beach, Brownfield Station, the Campo Station, throughout the San Diego County area there. So, at that time, it was just about every single night we were making arrests on a regular basis. Dozens, if not more, people in different smuggling events, focused on identifying who the foot guides are and trying to get a prosecution on those folks if we were able to, responding to any number of events where there's cross-border illegal activity. And for me, being able to work outdoors day in and day out, I had a very high sense of gratitude and appreciation for that job. There was a sentiment back then that I would do the job for free because there was that much gratification in being outdoors every single day, hiking the canyons, hiking the mountains, and then the adventure that comes with tracking people and making those interdictions is good. You do come across a lot of vulnerable people, folks in pretty difficult situations. Unfortunately, people die during the journey because of how dangerous it is. That's something that we see far too often. We are often rescuing people who've fallen and gotten injured or dehydrated. We arrest U.S. citizens on a regular basis for people who are engaged in smuggling. Those are typically people who got recruited to drive a load vehicle down to the border and pick up people who hiked to the side of the road, and then they're driving them out of the area further into the interior. So that's the common day-to-day stuff that we would see. I promoted to first line supervisor after 7 years out at the Boulevard Station, which is our East County. So that was kind of my first leadership role. I was 27 at the time, so kind of learning the ropes, trial and error.
Sure. Are you, when you're out there, how many of you are there for support? Are you only out there in pairs? Are you out there in fours? Who do you have there watching your back?
Yeah. The typical agent patrols by themselves on the line. So every station has a patrol group per shift, and that patrol group could be anywhere from 10 to 20 people to 30 people, depending on the size of the area. And depending on what station I was working at, we might have, 5, 6, or 7 people out for an area, or all the way up to 40. And that also depended on the time of my career. Obviously, we've grown extensively over the years. And so now most patrol groups out there on the southwest border are going to be a pretty good size of agents who go out and patrol. But that activity is typically an agent by themselves. Once they detect an illegal entry, other agents will respond and start working as a team to try to interdict that group.
Got it. Well, it still doesn't sound very safe. And there are a certain number of people that come to the border that are smuggling, but also trafficking, as well as are being forced into servitude by cartels, are having to come across the border and still having to pay cartels for coming across the border, where family lives are being threatened on the other side of the border. How many of these stories are you hearing, and how in depth do you get into what's going on there?
Yeah, that's actually a really good description of what we see, and it's good to hear you say that and recognize that that's the reality that we face, because I think a lot of folks don't realize that. First of all, anyone who is going to make the decision to illegally enter is doing so through the services of the cartel. There aren't situations across the southwest border where someone can just say, hey, you know what, I think I can do this on my own, and I'm going to try to sneak into the United States through this canyon using Google Maps, and I can, call a friend to pick me up. Like, that does not happen. And it hasn't been that way for decades. The cartels, the criminal organizations, they exert control over sections of borders they refer to as plazas, where they maintain the right to smuggle in that area. And so if you don't go through that cartel and you were to try to do it on your own, you would be, kidnapped and beaten and robbed, things like that, to where they exert control over that area. And they charge people, on average, about $10,000 each to be smuggled in. They recruit people through word of mouth, through social media, TikTok, you name it, where they're putting they advertise themselves as a travel agent and promise safe passage into the United States. They lie to the people, tell them, hey, we'll safely get you in. They never tell them about how dangerous it is. And those folks don't have that $10,000 up front. They may have to pay $500 or $1,000 up front for some of the initial logistics, like getting camouflage on their clothes, getting what we call booties, carpet to cover up their footprints, some logistics, water, backpacks, things like that. But the majority of that smuggling fee they pay after they're successfully smuggled in, and they have a job lined up where they're working illegally in the country, and then every paycheck they're paying the cartel back. And it could take them months or years to pay off that smuggling debt. And they're threatened that if they don't pay, they'll be harmed, or their family will be harmed. And so, it may not look like someone's, locked in a basement in shackles or anything like that. They're out in the public working in jobs throughout our communities that the general public may not even realize. But there's this underground agreement where they're, paying off their smuggling debt. And it's horrible, right? Because it undermines legitimate businesses. These companies that are knowingly hiring people illegally, they obviously don't care about our immigration laws or our labor laws. So they're probably not paying them the proper wages. They're not providing the proper living conditions. And they're probably violating a number of other laws that we require to, our country values good treatment of our workforce. I think it speaks to the founding of our country when we first started enacting immigration laws that prohibited forced labor from being brought to the United States, the abolishment of slavery, things like that, where we established these values to properly treat people who are doing work in the U.S. And so,
it breaks my heart because what the story you're telling now makes sense to the stories we were hearing from some Salt Lake law enforcement, where young men were coming across thinking, probably hearing it on the internet. And when they get here, their line of work is they are trafficked sexually. And one was, I guess, inadvertently rescued because it was in a drug bust that they found him, and he told them, I owe them this much of this many
this
years
much money.
in letting them pip me
You
out.
see it up here too. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, everybody knows the Mexican workers lining up at the Home Depots around the country, and then the day laborers that they do. Everybody picks up a few day laborers here and there, and you'll see people at the local Western Unions sending money,
Yeah.
local Walmart sending money, and they're all like, "Yeah, I'm sending money back to my family," and that's the story they're saying, right? But little do a lot of public know that they're a lot of that time they're really not sending money back to their family. They're paying off cartel debt, because if they don't get that cartel debt, I mean, paid off, then they have other family down there that will get threatened. The only caveat to that would be people outside of Mexico, right? Because the Mexican cartel is smuggling in Middle Easterners,
People from China.
a lot of people from China, India. I mean, we're hearing numbers where the Latin community down there still outnumbers and the vast majority of the immigrants, but I've been seeing sheriff's office and everything down there where massive populations from India, from China, from Pakistan, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, you name it, across Europe, crossing that border down there. And how does the cartel, I wouldn't know how the cartel would handle those type of people, because they would have no real leverage on them, so I don't know if they'd have to come
Other
and
than
pay.
we've heard when they come with families that they'll, I don't even want to say about the one where there's something in the water to warn the family, you don't do this, this is what's going to happen to the rest of your family that we have right here.
Yeah, I would say everybody pays, regardless of nationality. There are different smuggling fees. Some of the different nationalities are paying different for different stretches of the journey, like to get from Eastern Hemisphere to the Western Hemisphere, and then along their journey up. But the cartels at the immediate border they're charging a fee as well. And so there's still profit going back to the cartels, and even more so with some of the other nationalities where they charge even more.
Yeah. Well, anytime a police officer pulls somebody over, they start hearing the world of excuses, the story of poor me type stories. And when you're law enforcement down there, a lot of times it's not a poor me type story. You're actually hearing them relay what's happening to them, right? Kind of go through a few of the stories you or your fellow officers have actually heard coming from the mouths of those coming across the border.
Well, I mean, there's a lot there, but a lot of the folks are stating that they're coming to make a better living, right? They want to make better income. You can make $20 an hour here in California working at a fast food joint versus maybe $2 an hour in some other parts of Mexico or other parts of the world. And so there's an economic desire. There's also folks who report violence where they're coming from, that there's gang violence, things like that. But it's important to know that, there are asylum laws in our country where people who, if they're in the United States, they can make a request for an asylum hearing. But the regulations for asylum, what that protects is it protects people from persecution or torture from the place that they're living. It's not meant to protect someone who maybe lives in where there's a lot of crime in that city. Certainly we have parts of our own country where crime is higher than others. So that doesn't meet the threshold for asylum, and neither does economic purposes, right? Wanting to come make a better living in the United States. I mean, I certainly understand the desire, right? I mean, the United States is the land of opportunity. We lawfully immigrate over 1 million people every year into this country who are lawfully immigrate as permanent residents. That's more than any other country in the world, more than double the next closest country. Over 7 million people a year come here on non-immigrant visas, right? Student visas, work visas, guest visas, business visas. So we are not just a very open country, but the most open country in the world in terms of welcoming others to the opportunity that we have here. But the cartels are selling the shortcut, right? And they're luring people into it. And the only way that we can stop that from happening is if we are successful, if we can prove that they will not be successful by using the cartels to get here. And so we're focused on identifying the smugglers, holding them accountable, but we also have to hold the people accountable who choose to use the cartels to get here. So I want to put that out there that, as humans, we can empathize with the plight of the person who wants to make a better living, but we have to have accountability so that they don't make that decision. They don't put their lives into the hands of the ruthless cartels, because people die on a regular basis, drown in the ocean. Our agents are the ones out there doing CPR on them, trying to bring them back to life. Broken compound fractures, dehydration, heat exhaustion. Hundreds upon hundreds of times our agents are saving lives of people out there, or unfortunately not getting there soon enough and the person has already died out in the field. I can't tell you how many times folks have told us that they were sexually assaulted by their smugglers. And we do the best we can with it, get a medical treatment, but in terms of investigating the crime itself, oftentimes it happened before they entered the United States, so we don't have a whole lot of evidence to go on other than trying to get a description of the subjects and sharing that information with Mexico. But they're exploited, to say the least. They're robbed multiple times along their journey. They get in the middle of different cartel shootouts where smuggled aliens have been shot in the crossfire from cartel rivalries. It's just really an appalling situation when you talk about human smuggling.
What's the protocol once you have captured them? What's the turnaround time? How do you re-release them in safety?
So we make an arrest in the field. We're going to bring them to a station, take their fingerprints, biographical information, run record checks against all U.S. Law enforcement databases to see what kind of previous records they might have in the United States. That's going to depend what their pathway is. We also potentially will charge them for illegal entry. Entering the country at a place other than a port of entry is a crime. It's a misdemeanor crime, punishable by up to a year in prison, which should be, to me, it should be a common sense thing that, we have ports of entry for a reason. And so if you go around the ports, through a canyon, through the desert, like that's against the law, and it is punishable by time in prison. So every day we are prosecuting people for that, for illegal entry, the misdemeanor crime. But if you're deported and you come back again, that's a felony. So if they have a prior deport, we're going to be prosecuting them for felony reentry after deportation. If they have a criminal record on top of that, that's going to enhance the sentencing and the amount of time that they'll serve for that felony. Now, we're also conducting a full investigation with every single group because it is a felony smuggling event. So we're trying to identify who are the smugglers, who are the associates, who are the load drivers, who are the lookouts, where's the financial elements coming from. We're going to collect as much evidence as we can about that smuggling event so that we can also present those cases for prosecution to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Well, a lot of times the masses kind of get lost in numbers, right? And that so many people come across the border, they get lost in the numbers. What we want to do with our audience here is kind of make this personal. And so if you have 1, 2, or 3 stories of actual events that you've seen, specific individuals, you can code name their names, of kids, parents, of just give us 2 or 3 experiences of what your interactions with a specific individual, what they told you, what they went through, whether it's a rape victim or drug trafficking victim or just a normal person. Just make this seem real to the public.
There's quite a lot, right? Because these are interactions that we have on a daily basis throughout our career, but there are a few that they're really...
I'm sure there's a few that really stand out in your mind that you won't forget, right?
Yeah, early in my career, I was assigned out to Ajo, Arizona. I was 21 years old out in Ajo, which is very, very remote section of desert. Not a whole lot of civilization, if any at all, out there. You have the Lukeville port of entry, very, very small town, and then Ajo, Arizona, which is a really small town. And so the groups that enter out there are typically hiking for days on end before they make it to any kind of civilization or to a freeway where they can get picked, or to a highway where they can get picked up by a.
And what's the temperature
Right.
like out there?
I mean, it gets over 110 degrees in the summertime. Even in the springtime, it's in the 90s. Definitely hot enough for folks to get to die and from the heat exhaustion out there. And we saw a lot of that, a lot of death out in the desert from people who are abandoned by their smugglers. If you don't keep up with the smugglers, they keep going and they leave you there. And at that time, there also wasn't a whole lot of there was really no cell phone reception. Nowadays, there's a little bit more cell reception where people can call, and people have cell phones now where they can call 911. It's a little bit easier for us to rescue folks if we can get to them on time. But going back to that time, I came across a young family. The guy was 19 years old. His wife was 18 years old, and they were on a 10-speed bicycle. Each had a bicycle, and they had a little car seat with an infant in the car seat. And they were about 30 miles north of the border. When I came across them, they were all beet red, flushed, dehydrated, on the early stages of heat exhaustion. They were beyond that dehydration stage, so getting close to emergency type situation, including their infant newborn who was with them. And my immediate thought was let's get these guys some water, try to help them out. But I asked the guy, I was kind of asking, what are you thinking? Why would you take your young child on a bicycle in the middle of the desert, the middle of nowhere? You got another 20 miles before you even make it to a town. He was already 30 miles in, and he told me, he's like, the smuggler lied to me. The guy who sold me the bike told me it was only a 15 or 20 minute bike ride. I just had to follow the pole line road, and it would only take me 15 or 20 minutes. And so that was, it just kind of stuck with me, because had I not found them, they would have died out there. We were only running about 5 agents for the whole patrol group for that area. And you're talking 60 miles of border, very vast open desert. So just, stumbling across these folks out there who were desperate, on the verge of death, lied to by their smugglers. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case for everyone. I also came across the remains of the skeletal remains of a child out there, and just tragic reality of the border environment. And
What do you think the age was of the child?
Probably in a toddler.
You're talking 2-3-year-old toddler. You found that the remains of.
Right. Yeah, and this is just one day, or this is a 30-day snapshot of my experience out there, but that remained the case for years and years on end, with hundreds of people illegally entering.
How many deceased people do you think you ran by that were already deceased out there that you've come up on?
Me personally, just that one. I was only out there for 30 days. We call those details, where we get sent out to other sectors to help out when the traffic volume is really high, and that was the case at that time in the early 2000s. So we were sent out there to help. But it was a regular occurrence for agents across.
Well, now
the
that
board.
you're the chief, how often does your unit run into that now, or has they run into it where you run and they're already deceased?
Yeah, thankfully those numbers are down tremendously for us right now, and that's a testament to the level of control that we've achieved right now. We have the lowest level of illegal entries that we've seen on record across the southwest border, and so with that means less people dying, less rescue.
Well, how bad was it
less
during the Biden administration? What did you see out there?
Well, I'll tell you, I was a deputy chief in Tucson sector during in 2023, 2024. In the summer of 2023, we had at least one person a day die out in the desert, out in the Tucson sector area. At least one person a day, from teenagers to elders, you name it.
How big is that sector? How many miles is that sector?
It's over 200 miles of border out there. It's a much larger section of border than we have here in San Diego. 1,953 miles of border along the southwest.
Yeah, 1953. So you got to be imagining 20 to 100 people a day dying across that entire border. What are you thinking?
No, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's that high. Like El Paso and Tucson at the time during that year had the highest number of deaths. I think the terrain, the remoteness of the desert there, the vastness of it, kind of creates a little bit more of that scenario where people are needing to get rescued.
kind of go through a few more stories of what you've seen. I know that Holman was telling a story, and this was a true story that he experienced, where I think he was down in Texas somewhere, and along the border, and there's a box truck coming through, and they opened up the back of the box truck, and there had been 20 to 25 people in there, men, women, kids, all of them dead, all of them, every single one of them. And it's where it was so hot in there, they just died of heat exhaustion. And, well, there wasn't all of them. It was like 20 out of 25 of them died. There was only like 5 people left. And the one story he tells is there was this father holding a son, and one of the fellow people told him that all the child was doing is saying, "Dad, I don't want to die. Dad, I don't want to die. Dad, I don't want to die," the whole time. And the father's trying to do everything he could to protect the child, and then the son literally dies in father's arms. And then shortly thereafter, the witness says the father also passed away. And then 20 other people passed away. And he says what happened was the Border Patrol, or the smuggler was seeing Border Patrol coming, and he just left the truck there, didn't open it, didn't do it, just got out of the truck and ran, right? And it ended up sitting there because the Border Patrol, he thought they were coming, but they didn't actually come for another couple of hours, and they just sat there and baked. And I mean, that's experience I heard Tom Holman say in the media. I mean, have you seen events like that?
Yeah, I mean, there are countless experiences like that for our agents. One of the things we see frequently here, we have the border wall system is pretty extensive, right? So we have a 30-foot fence on our primary fence, and then a secondary fence that's 30 feet tall. And the smugglers will have the aliens climb it with a rebar ladder that hooks on top of the fence. Super dangerous. And so they'll convince them to climb up it, and they'll deliberately leave one person on top and then take the rest of the group north, so that our resources are focused on rescuing that person who's stuck on top of the fence. And we've had people fall off. They're trying to climb down, and they fall off. We've had people die from that fall, significant injuries from that process as well. And agents are there on scene. You know, sometimes they're on the other side of the fence as the person and not able to get to them quickly to provide them medical aid, and it would likely be too late anyway because of the significance of the injuries. But those are very traumatic events for the agents involved that are responding, and it's really sad to see people fall victim to the lies of the cartels like that. But you know, being abandoned out in the mountains is just a daily occurrence. Folks, they can't keep up, or they, you know, like you said, we'll be moving in on a group, and the smuggler's going to take off. People run in different directions. And we're doing everything we can to try to track down everyone who may be outstanding from that group. But if folks are abandoned on their own, not able to call for help, then you know, the worst scenario can happen where they end up dying out there.
Right, it's terrible. Do you have any other stories like the one you just told that the audience could hear? Because again, we want to make sure the audience understands what you guys are going through.
In terms of like the abuse and the neglect, you know, in San Diego, one unique element is maritime smuggling that we have. So Ponga boats, open bow vessels, they'll load with 20 plus people. They'll take these boats out in inclement weather when there's like a small craft advisory. So small vessels should not be on the water because of the size of the surf and the tides. And when they're coming into shore, they're very reckless about how they come into the shore. The pongas will flip over. Folks may or may not know how to swim. And so our agents are coming across these situations where people have been trapped underneath the boats. The agents are the ones rushing into the water, trying to flip the boat back over, rescue folks who are trapped from underneath it. We had a couple fatalities in a situation like that this year where the agents are there with those individuals on the shoreline trying to do CPR, resuscitating those they can. Unfortunately, we had about, I think, 3 people died during one of the most recent events where a ponga flipped over, and our agents were able to rescue several others.
People just don't think about this. They don't consider what's honestly happening on the border, how much death is actually happening on the border. And that's just the random accidents and the cruelty of the cartel. Now you get into the real cruelty, which is the trafficking, the child sex trafficking, the human trafficking, the drug trafficking. What are you seeing in the trafficking aspect of all this?
So if we have an event where we suspect there's going to be, like, there's potentially trafficking, if it's an unaccompanied child, we're working with, if it's a minor in general, we're working with our investigative partner with Homeland Security Investigations. They will launch an investigation and look into where that person is going. We work very closely with HSI to do as much evidence collection as we can and help further that investigation. And they'll also be placed with the Office of Refugee Resettlement for that way they're in a holding capacity that's better suited for children rather than going into the adult detention facilities that we have. But any scenarios like that where we see, an example would be like a father holding or a supposed father holding a baby and not even having any kind of knowledge of how to care for a child, maybe getting the name wrong or mixed up. These are like obvious indicators that it doesn't match up. We would see people recycle children so that they had the belief that they would be released, because at a certain point we weren't able to hold family units in detention. And so if anyone was crossing with a family several years back, they were being released. And so people would send the kids back to go be used with another adult so that they could enter as a family and then be released, which subjected those kids to, God only knows what type of abuse.
What are we considering the age range of these kids are?
You name it, all the way from 1 years old up to 12, 13, 14 years old.
I can't even imagine what that's like going through that. Again, the public just doesn't know anything about these stories, and that's what we're trying to get them to understand is that why we have to shut down the border. This is not ethical. This is not moral. And there's a lot of people out there just want to have a straight up open border. And we've mentioned many times on this podcast that is not sustainable. Our legal immigration is sustainable, where people come across and they learn to appreciate the country, learn to study, learn the Constitution, learn about our wars, the men who have died to forgive us, the safety, the freedoms that we have. They learn to appreciate what is here. My wife is from Colombia, and she immigrated legally, and I got her through the whole citizenship process, and she swore in as a U.S. citizen just over a year ago after, 9 years of the citizenship process that we had to go through to make that happen. But she has a real legitimate appreciation for this country, almost more patriotism than the actual people that are born and raised in this country. I see significant more patriotism there. And a lot of other people, I've seen people coming in from Ukraine, I've seen people coming in from other Baltic countries that are very, very socialist, and they just express absolute patriotism. And when they see socialism or communism being spread around here, they're like crying. He says, you guys don't know what you're doing. I escaped from that to come to here to not have that, yet you guys want to push us back into that environment? Anyway, the point I'm making is when you have legal immigration, people go through a process and learn to appreciate something. When you have an illegal process, they don't have an appreciation. A lot of them come over with an entitlement type of a mentality. They come across with the attitudes of what they've grown up with, which all they've grown up with is violence, socialism type countries, whether it's Mexico or these other countries. And so they bring those ideologies with them because
they don't know any different.
They don't know any different. That's all they know. It's not like the education over there is teaching them capitalism and freedom in those countries. And so they come over with an entitlement mentality, a give me type mentality. And then you have a lot of people here that just want to give these same individuals free handouts, where they're getting Medicare, they're getting Medicaid, they're getting food stamps, they're getting all this free stuff. in exchange, or they're getting sanctuary city status, sanctuary state status, and trying to get them on voter rolls. I mean, we can go on and on with the amount of problems and the reasons why a lot of people on the left want to bring these people into the country. But when you bring in 20 million people that have the wrong ideology, that don't appreciate something, that extremely takes away from the values we have in this country and dilutes the freedoms that we have and the ability for us to even sustain anything like even remotely close to that. So when we're talking about the border, I mean, there's a real impact of what happens to those citizens of us that have to absorb that type of illegal immigration, in addition to what's happening to the individuals and the crime that's happening to individuals that are coming across. So there's, in either scenario, it's not good for our country. It's just not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for us.
I would say the only people who benefit from that are the cartels, because they're making a tremendous amount of money off of everyone that they're smuggling in.
Well, that's what I want to get to here is I want the public to see noticeable differences between the Biden administration and Trump administration. During the Biden administration, those 4 years, we saw the camps, on the border camps, where there was thousands underneath freeways. You guys had these massive tents set up. There was this catch and release program going on. Biden was even giving out Social Security numbers within 2 weeks of some of them arriving and releasing them. People were getting flights to different parts of the country. And there's all this stuff going out there. You're on the border. What were the actual policies during the Biden administration? What were you seeing happening?
I think, what started during that administration, like you said when we were talking earlier, that I starting when I was 20 years old, after 26 years, I've served under numerous administrations. And every administration worked to improve border security, whether it was Clinton, Bush, Obama, and then the Trump administration. At the start of that administration, we stopped all border wall, border infrastructure construction, right, as an order from the presidential office there. And then we also started not holding people in custody, so releasing people from custody prior to the adjudication of their immigration case. And so that created a snowball effect. It took a little bit of time for people to realize what was happening. Like, wait, I could illegally enter through the cartels, and it started off with just if they were a family, if they had a family, then I could be released. That's when we started getting these kind of fake family units, or children being, recycled, their families deliberately coming with, deliberately coming with children. Then that number grew so large that we could no longer keep up with the single adults that were crossing. And so single adults were also being released. And once that happened, the word got out quickly, word of mouth. People are letting their family, friends know, and we started seeing people from all over the world illegally entering via way of the cartel. It created a snowball effect to, the point. And when I was in Tucson sector, we had nights with over 3,500 people illegally entering on a single night, with kids ranging from all ages, very remote areas. And so that was the big policy piece that created that mass migration.
Let's get some specific numbers. How many people do you think in your areas were released? Thousands, millions. How many people did you see in just your area get released?
Ballpark, it would be in the high 80 to 90 percentile range of the volume.
Is that hundreds of thousands? Is that tens of thousands? How many do you think that is just ballpark?
Hundreds of thousands of people. So if you're talking about people from Mexico, it's very easy to repatriate them because Mexico is right there. But just about any other country out there, we have to work with that country. That was another challenge we had, is many of the countries out there were not cooperating with taking their citizens back. And so that changed quickly with the most recent administration change, where our leadership worked closely, used the strength of our country's leadership to encourage those countries to take their citizens back. Those two things have been very helpful in reducing the illegal entries, reducing the human smuggling volume, reducing the amount of money going to the cartels for people to come here illegally.
Well, there are estimates that prior to Biden, we already had in the neighborhood of 20 million illegal immigrants in the country. And during the Biden administration alone, people were estimating an additional 20 million illegals came into the country. Do you find those numbers accurate, feasible, plausible?
I'm not sure precisely what those numbers are, but it's absolutely in the millions in terms of how many people were, came in during that time. There may be a slight nuance to it that, our government essentially released, they were processed and released. And so given paperwork with a notice to appear at a court date, and that court date could have been anywhere from a year to 7 or 8 years down the road. But we as the U.S. government gave them that paperwork to be released and gave them the authority to travel basically anywhere in the country pending the adjudication of their hearing.
Which is crazy that, because you're releasing people into the country saying, hey, here's your court date, knowing that the likelihood of them showing up at the court date is like next to nothing. Because once they're released, I mean, who's going to go track where they went and force you to come back to court, right? The other part of that was the government actually paying for bus rides and plane tickets for these illegals to go to New York or Florida, these other states? Was that? Because that's what we were hearing. Was that legitimately happening?
Well, to the extent that we were turning people over to nonprofit organizations or non-governmental organizations, however, there were grant.
So a lot of NGOs are paying for the flights.
Correct.
So the Border Patrol did not schedule flights or anything like that. You guys would just turn them over to an NGO, and an NGO would ship them off to other parts of the country?
They would coordinate. I don't want to speak to their role because that was kind of their part, but they would coordinate their hotel stays, flights, things like that. And they would, were supported through not just donations, but also government grants as well.
Yeah, well, we all know where the NGOs are getting their money from. We've covered that from USAID and others where most of these NGOs are getting their funds from. The other big controversy out there was the holding centers, right? You saw during the Biden administration kids in cages and these fences where they had mats on the floor and everybody laying down. And then a lot of those images were recycled during the Trump administration, saying that, no, Trump was the only one putting kids in cages, and when those pictures were all actually from the Obama administration. How was that actually handled from kids to parents? Obviously, you had a lot of fake parents, a lot of real parents. What was the protocol during Biden? What was the protocol during Trump?
Well, I mean, I just maybe frankly say that like the kids in cages nomenclature there is really nonsense. When we have a Border Patrol station that becomes quickly overwhelmed with thousands of people, our agents do everything they can to provide for the care for those folks. Oftentimes they're getting some of the best care they've gotten in a while after the tragic routes that they've been trafficked through the Darien Gap there in Central America, up through Mexico, stashed in the back of trailers, 80 to 100 people in the back of the trailers. When agents come into contact with folks, we're doing everything we can to care for them until the next entity in line in the government system can, take them into their custody, whatever that next phase may be, whether it's ICE detention, whether it's Office of Refugee Resettlement, or whether it's release. The Border Patrol agents, I've witnessed out of their own pockets purchase, lactose-free formula for a baby, maybe that we didn't have the right type of formula, brought toys from their kids' rooms to, unaccompanied children who are in our facilities. When at time, when we were seeing hundreds, if not thousands of people in a relatively short period of time, we did everything we could to build a secure area to hold them until they could be moved into the next phase of the processing. And, they used chain link fence inside of a warehouse with mats. We're really kind of scrambling to do everything we can to provide those services. Over time, during the last administration, we began contracting out what we called soft-sided facilities that came with contractors. So funding became available through Congress to contract out soft-sided facilities that came with, laundry, shower, food, medical, really providing a really sanitary, safe, nutritious environment for people that we were processing until they moved on to the next phase, more likely than not being released.
The media really wants to paint an evil, diabolical picture of all this, right? I mean, we've all heard the mainstream media and how they really want to paint this as just the worst picture possible of what's going on there. So it's not flattering by any stretch of the imagination. What were your feelings going through and seeing that type of rhetoric going up on TV and just kind of painting that evil picture and making you guys look like the bad guys? I mean, what's going through your head as a patrol agent when that happens?
Well, there's one thing we have to do for our own self-preservation and wellness, and that's to focus on the things that we can control and not get mired down by the politics and the theater that's out there in the public, because it does affect our agents. And so as a leader, I'm trying to do everything I can to take care of our agents, take care of their well-being, and focus on what the task is at hand for the day. But it can create some challenges for us because our agents have shed blood, sweat, and tears carrying out the mission. We put a lot of physical exertion into our job, on foot, hiking in pretty remote areas. Agents, they do a lot to interdict people who are being smuggled into the country. They put their lives on the line for that mission, and to have that mission really rendered ineffective through the policy of releasing people was a very damaging thing to the morale of our entire organization, where a number of people left the organization. And unfortunately, we also had a high number of suicides within the Border Patrol. So morale was, to say the least, was impacted pretty significantly. And then talking about our current environment there we're in now, where we have U.S. citizens, impeding Border Patrol agents who are trying to do their job, who are trying to arrest somebody who was smuggled into the country and got away from us. Maybe they got away from us a month ago or a couple of years ago. They still illegally entered and were smuggled in. Maybe they have criminal records. Maybe they don't in the U.S. But either way, they were smuggled in, got away from us. We're going to go out and hold those people accountable, just like I think you would expect most other countries to do if you violated their laws. And to have U.S. citizens try to block us and get in our way from doing our job it's concerning. But our agents are vigilant. They're strong to their oath, and they're gonna persevere and keep driving forward with our mission.
What resources do you have to help with the mental health of your officers?
We have invested, Customs and Border Protection as a whole has invested considerably in wellness for our workforce. We do have a contract where we are able to provide wellness services to many of our people. It's not everywhere in the country yet, but it is a growing program that we have. We also have extensive clinicians available to our workforce that it's good to see our agents and employees using that service. We have a considerable number of peer support chaplains. So it is something that we take to heart. I mean, I'll tell you, we've come a long way since I've joined, but we're staying focused on getting even better, providing even more training and support to our agents on how to cope with some of the traumatic things that we come across during our careers.
Well, it's really hard because you see this in all branches, whether it's law enforcement or military. There's a lot of PTSD when our military comes back from the theater of things they've seen, people have died. Our law enforcement officers, and we've had maybe 4 sheriffs on the last couple of weeks in different counties here in Utah and others. They've experienced things when they were down in the border in Arizona. I mean, Zach Van Emmerich was on, and he was talking about how the sheriff down there saw a cartel guy grab a small child infant.
That's what I was talking about.
Threw him in the river, so that the Border Patrol would have to go and try to save the infant and occupy them while they hurried and got the rest of the people across the border. And it was an infant. I mean, and obviously the Border Patrol is going to go to that first, and the cartel knows what's going to happen. But then our officers, our police officers, our highway patrol officers, our sheriff's offices, they'll see the results of what's coming across the border. They'll see this child trafficking in our communities. They'll see the sex trafficking. They'll place the arrests everywhere in this country. There's not a county or state in this country is not affected by what's coming across the border. And our officers are going from these horrific scenes to trying to just deal with the public in general, do common speeding tickets and stuff like that, and trying to calm down emotions. And because they went from a high stress environment or incredibly sad environment where they're trying to keep their own tears back and just can't believe what humans do to other humans. And I can only imagine that a little bit of both of that is going and happening within the Border Patrol itself. You guys are probably seeing the worst inhumanity to other humans possible when you're dealing with cartel members down there. And so mentally, you have to be able to deal with that on a daily basis. Go and see the suffering of other human beings and then go home and be normal, right? Go home and be normal.
Yeah.
So the mental stability goes a long way. You were mentioning before that back during the Biden administration, 2020, 2023, you had almost 20 suicides that year amongst the entire Border Patrol, and now it's gone down a little bit. Ingrid asked you a little bit about the mental health. How do you what are the differences? Do you think border policies between administrations affect that, and how are you guys helping your fellow soldiers?
Well, I certainly think the drastic policy shifts between that, the last administration change, like pretty significant shifts in the environment have had notable impacts, but the job itself does have traumatic events associated with it. It's not unique to the Border Patrol, like you mentioned, whether you're law enforcement, military, nursing, medical, paramedics. I mean, you name it, there's folks everywhere are exposed to some type of traumatic events throughout their lives. And so we're focused on providing the training to our workforce on how to live a healthy, balanced lifestyle, how to cope with the aftermath of traumatic events. There's organizations out there like Boulder Crest that teach post-traumatic growth. And I think we've seen some value in that training material where we've been able to, have that training available. So we're looking at everything out there that's available, learning from other organizations, bringing new capabilities to the table, and trying to get as much support and resources for our workforce as we can.
Well, I mean, you've been in 26 years in Border Patrol. You've been in leadership for an extensive amount of time. Kind of relate to the public so they can, again, see the humanity behind this. I mean, you've had to have seen your fellow Border Patrol agents just break down and maybe break down in tears of what they've seen, kind of express to the public what you've experienced, what others have experienced of what you've seen out there.
I mean, when you look at some of the stuff that we went through with the large number of families that would come into our custody, and when we didn't have all the contracted support, we were kind of on our own for a while, right? Because resources only come by one way, and that's through Congress appropriations. And so we found ourselves in a position where we didn't have a whole lot of resources to deal with the thousands of people who were coming in, people with small children, adults who had children with medical issues who didn't know how to care for it and would hand babies off to our agents asking for help. And, we may not have an EMT nearby right away, and agents are trying to do everything they can in kind of crisis type situations. So definitely had a number of tough conversations and just supporting conversations with agents who struggled through those environments. There's a lot of pretty rough incidences that I'd rather not describe in too much detail on those. But I can tell you that the toll that it takes on the agents is real. We all have, not all of us, but some of us have kids at home, and just the element of seeing that despair day in and day out can weigh on you. can weigh on our workforce.
All right. Well, then let's move away from the sad side of this thing. Because again, we're trying to give the public a reality check, right? Because the public fails to see that a lot of times. It's an absolute reality check. Let's go to like the hard, violent side of this and confiscations. So, tell us about the experiences of just hard violence, and then have you guys the tunnels you got through? There's a recent tunnel that you guys have discovered within the last month or so. The sizable confiscations, maybe you're confiscating fentanyl, other drugs. I mean, go through some of the sizes of illegal drugs or fentanyl that's coming across the border, what you guys have seen confiscated.
Yeah. One of the benefits of having the illegal entry volume reduced is that our agents are back out on patrol on the highways. They're back out on patrol in some of the remote areas because we're not bogged down with processing, hundreds of people a day. We're averaging about 30 arrests a day for illegal entry in between the ports of entry. And those are some of the lowest numbers we've seen on record. So our agents are able to be more proactive. And so, this year alone, over 2,000 pounds of cocaine our agents have pulled off the highways. These are vehicle stops, situations like that. Over 1,000 pounds of methamphetamine, over 1,000 pounds of fentanyl. It's rewarding to be able to keep those products out of our community. We know we still have more work to do in terms of cutting down the flow of narcotics, right? You can see the drugs within our communities, and that's one indicator where we can kind of look at and say, all right, we have more work to do, and dismantling these cartels, dismantling these organizations that are responsible. And by the way, the same organizations that are smuggling humans are the same organizations that are smuggling narcotics. They're not separate. They're intertwined. They pay their clauses and smuggling rights up to the hierarchy of the criminal organization. And so that's another big part of our focus is, the president has declared, certain cartels foreign terrorist organizations. And so we're working really closely with the Department of War, with our other governmental agencies, to share as much information as we have that we collect, the evidence that we collect during the course of our duties with other government agencies, where we can work to take action against those criminal networks. We also work extremely closely with the government of Mexico, really good relationship with both the military and law enforcement and the equivalent of the Attorney General's office in Mexico to help support their ability to prosecute people for smuggling in Mexico.
How easy is it to work with the Mexicans? I mean, cartels control even law enforcement and courts down there. So how easy is it to work with those people down there?
For the Border Patrol, my entire career, we have worked to maintain a good, first and foremost, a good working relationship with our partners. When you think about it, out in the border environments, it's just us. Typically we're the only government agency out there in some of these remote locations or patrolling on the immediate border. And then the only other entity that could potentially be close to help us on the Mexican side is going to be some type of Mexican authority, whether it's their military or their law enforcement. And so we invest heavily in maintaining good working relationships with them through regular meetings, conversations. So we do keep a really good working relationship with them. Now, the part about some of the more dangerous actions like arresting high-level cartel members is, that's dangerous for Mexican law enforcement and military, sometimes leads to shootouts, gun battles, pretty dangerous environments for them. So there have been limitations over the years on how much they can do or how much they're able to do. And we've seen their commitment to taking action against the cartel significantly increase in the last, year and a half or so.
Well,
where they are
Trump threatened them with tariffs, doubling, tripling, 100% tariffs, because she didn't want to do it at first. The president didn't want to do any of that at first, but then.
Well, she's got her hands tied a little bit too, but that's great to
really
hear.
Quick when he announced that he's going to give her 100% tariffs, but.
Has a cartel have you ever been part of the cartel actually engaging you at the border?
Yeah, I would say that's what we do every day. That's our adversary day in and day out is the cartel, whether it's the Sinaloa cartel, the CJ and GBU Generation cartel, the Liscar, the Legacy Tijuana cartel. That is who our agents face day in and day out, whether it's the foot guides, the low ranking, the scouts, coordinators. We develop up, we work up investigations and warrants, and we'll, arrest, serve warrants at people's houses who are members of the cartel in the United States. So that is what the Border Patrol does day in and day out.
So the guides the smugglers aren't leaving them right at the border and then having them fend for themselves. They're going a little ways into it. They're coming
Traditionally,
into.
yeah. The only
far?
time people just by the thousands being left at the border was during that time period where we were releasing folks. And then they had no reason to run from us. They would just have to cross the border and surrender to agents because they knew they'd be released. But traditionally before that, and then now returning back to more the traditional smuggling routes, people are going through long, extensive journeys through the mountains, or in some of the urban areas, it is a quick shot. It may just be a 50-yard dash to a vehicle where they load up in the vehicle and drive off.
And what percentage are getting past you?
Right now, we're at about a 95% interdiction effectiveness rate, which is pretty darn good.
Sweet.
It does mean that we do still have people that get away from us. We have investigative capabilities, intelligence capabilities where we can locate those folks, even if they did get away from us. We can use our resources to try to figure out where they landed in the U.S. and then go pick them up.
Well, what is your exact jurisdiction? How far off the border are you guys allowed to operate?
We Border Patrol agents are allowed to exercise our arrest authority anywhere in the United States, but there are some unique elements to our authority within the Immigration and Nationality Act that allows us to enter onto private lands within 25 miles of the border, right? And so like you'll see that with like ranches and things like that are right on the border where groups are going through those ranches. Agents are going to follow and track those folks through those ranches on foot typically. Or people run into the more urban areas, groups will run into people's backyards. We'll pursue and chase them into backyards. So our authority allows us to enter onto private lands, not into a person's dwelling, right? Or it would just be like the curtilage of that property. And then beyond that, there's the 100 air mile assessment where Border Patrol agents have the authority to board and search conveyances to look for aliens, people who have entered or being smuggled into the country. And so that's where you'll see us deploy checkpoints on highways and egress routes away from the border, where it's just a very quick conversation with someone, quick question them on their citizenship. And then if we develop further suspicion, that may lead to a search or a longer detention.
So what are the jurisdictional or departmental differences between Border Patrol and ICE?
Very similar in terms of our authority, but our mission roles, the Border Patrol's mission is to prevent the illegal entry of people with contraband from getting to the United States. So we focus very much the majority of our resources up front and close on the border. ICE's mission is the enforcement of immigration laws throughout the country. I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of ICE, but we work very closely with them. And so their work site enforcement to ensure employers are adhering to immigration law. If people have overstayed a visa, they're looking to hold those folks accountable. If they find information about someone who's committed a crime in the country, they've got jail records, things like that, or they placed a detainer on someone, they'll be the ones going to the jails, picking people up. And then they're also responsible for the removal process. So holding people in detention during the adjudication of their immigration proceedings is ICE's mission at all.
So it's more like you're in the preventative or recently crossed type arena, and then once they're in the United States, kind of ICE takes over. Would that be kind of a general explanation of the difference?
Somewhat, but they also have that role of enforcing immigration law across the board, which we have the authority to do that as well, but we're focused on the line, on the border. So, you could have someone who visits the United States legally, right, but they overstay their visa, right? They're out of status and they can be arrested. ICE is going to be the ones typically doing that, right? Because we're focused on the line in between the ports of entry. If we come across someone like that at one of our checkpoints or just on a vehicle stop, we're certainly going to arrest them as well. But our primary focus is down on the line. If we develop information that someone's, let's say, up in Los Angeles or up in Utah that got away from us, then we can either go there ourselves, or I'm going to call my my counterparts in ICE up in Utah to go hold those folks accountable.
Going back to the drugs, what has been your biggest seizure so far? What have you seen where, I mean, we see it all the time on TV where we see 20 pounds or 1,000 pounds and they spread everything out on the table and they take these huge pictures of all the arms of drugs and everything they've captured. And what single event or single events have you seen that you guys have captured pretty significant amounts of drugs or arms coming across?
Well, you mentioned the tunnel recently that we discovered out in Otay Mesa. And I gotta give a shout out to HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. That was their investigation. We worked closely with them on that case, where we had information that a tunnel was being constructed, and so HSI.
Is this just informants, or how do you get the information?
Well, they use a variety of different investigative techniques, but ultimately had enough information to where they believed that they had finally completed the tunnel and were attempting to move product through it. We never know what it is until we make that interdiction. So the first time that HSI believed that the cartel was moving product for them, collectively working with the sheriff's department, took those transporters down, and I believe it was over 2,000 keys of cocaine, a couple of arrests with that as well. So that was a pretty significant sized load and a huge blow to the cartel, because they spent millions constructing those tunnels, sophisticated tunnels, and probably spent about a year building it with ventilation, railway system, lighting, things like that. So that was a significant blow to the cartel on that.
So are you leaving the tunnel as is, or are you destroying it or preventing further use of it?
Yeah, we remediate the tunnel. We use like a concrete type slurry or fill it in. Essentially, we'll fill it in like that.
That's a lot of concrete slurry.
Yeah.
So again, going back to drugs, outside that tunnel, have you yourself arrested people where you've had large amounts, and what's been the record you've seen so far outside of that tunnel?
Me personally, not a whole lot, and it's been a number of years. Maybe they've got like 14 pounds of meth just down the street from our sector building here, probably about 5 years ago. Just kind of stumbled across a smuggling event where people were pulling magnet loads. So what they'll do is they'll take people who are regular crossers into the United States and potentially unknowing, and they'll put magnet loads of meth under their vehicle or whatever drug. And then those people are regularly driving into the U.S., and then the smugglers will come up and pull the drugs out from underneath the vehicle. So I came across one of those personally earlier in my career, another 15, 16 pounds of meth, hidden compartment in a vehicle that it came through out in Calexico and driving into San Diego. But our agents up in San Clemente and Temecula at the Newton Azarac station, they're really good at watching traffic on the highway, detecting criminal behavior, and discovering hidden compartments of narcotics. So we're seeing a lot of cocaine.
I mean, Temecula, that's quite high up there into the state of California. I mean, that's a ways up there. So when you're that far inland, how do you know who you're pulling over? Because, I mean, you got highway patrol out there, you got sheriff's offices out there doing the same thing you're doing. How do you know who you're pulling over to discover stuff like that when you're that far inland?
It's a technique that the agents develop over time. Like, you notice indicators of criminal activity. Just like we get really good at tracking people out in the mountains. It's a technique that you develop over time. The more you do it, the more repetitions you get good at tracking foot sign by doing it a lot. Agents get good at detecting criminal behavior on the highway. So, people, when they're breaking the law, they have a tendency to do certain mannerisms and behaviors that they're unable to control themselves from doing. So agents chewing on those things, we're also able to, get some information off their license plates, see their travel patterns, where they've been, if they've got any history of smuggling activity. Those are all indicators that might give us enough suspicion to pull a vehicle over. And then after the vehicle stop, the hard part is finding out where they have it hidden, right? So they're they can be very creative in how they hide narcotics, bulk cash, weapons, in their vehicle, whether it's behind the dashboard, exhaust manifolds, gearboxes, gas tank, you name it. But the agents, they train for this stuff. They train daily. They practice searching vehicles. We also use canines to give us additional, probable cause or suspicion that there may be drugs or cash in a vehicle. So just the repetition of that. But I got to give it to those agents because I'm not that good at it personally. The agents who do it day in and day out, they really develop a keen skill for that. And it's not just those stations, stations throughout the country. Campo, we have a big checkpoint out on Interstate 8 in Pine Valley. The agents out there are really good at it. And we have some specialized teams who focus on those threats on a regular basis as well.
Well, the cartels get really creative. I mean, we've seen the images. I mean, the easiest stuff is where they take off door panels, they start stuffing it in doors, and then they redo the upholstery and stuff it in the seats and stuff like that. But lately I've seen images where they've taken the car completely apart and they literally start putting it into the frame of the vehicle itself, like literally right into the frame. You mentioned gas tank where half of it's full of fuel and the other half is still drugs. You mentioned gearboxes. I mean, they're really getting more and more creative to get those drugs across. So I've always wondered how would you know to take apart a car and look in a frame? I mean, and I don't know if a dog can smell inside of steel or not, but how is that even figured out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say it's not easy. It's definitely not easy work. And you think about like a semi truck, the rails on a semi truck too, use that. Batteries inside the actual tires themselves attached to the rims. I always tell people, like, anything that your imagination can think of, they're doing it, or they've tried it, or they've done it in the past. But any void whatsoever, they're going to try to take advantage of and use that as a mechanism. So we have inspection areas where we outfit with lifts and tools, things like that.
But how do you know what car to pull over? Say, this one's suspicious, we're going to take that one apart. Because looking at the border, particularly the actual legitimate border crossing where people are supposed to come over. I mean, you guys got one of the biggest ones there right there in San Diego. Is like 10 lanes wide or something like that where people are coming across?
It's more like 50 lanes wide.
50 lanes wide going across there. I've seen that border crossing there. I mean, it's the biggest one in the country, right?
Yes.
And how do you know which vehicle is suspicious or not? Is it just questioning the individuals in the vehicle and you try to find them suspicious? And then once you have the vehicle pulled to the side and you're looking around, you got your mirrors out there, you got your dog out there. How do you know?
If it's a Toyota, it gets primary.
I think it's in the frame of the car on this, right? I mean, I would have no idea how you guys are discovering that, because that's obviously
it's a tough job. So that is our same agency, Customs and Border Protection, that works the port of entries. But those are Customs and Border Protection officers in a blue uniform. We're same agency. Wrong patch. So this is the U.S. Border Patrol. We are in between the ports, but our parent agency of Customs and Border Protection, we work with our partners there, the Customs and Border Protection officers at the ports. They wear a blue uniform. And then we also have our partner agency in CBP called Air and Marine Operations. They're the ones flying helicopters and patrolling out in the ocean. So I got to give it to those guys and gals at the ports of entry, because they do have to be really sharp. They have seconds to make a decision whether they're going to secondary that vehicle for further inspection, and they have to ensure keep the flow of lawful travel going. We don't want to impede lawful commerce coming into the country, and so whether it's a number of tools, canines, intelligence, targeting, X-ray type scanners, things like that, non-intrusive inspection equipment, all of those combined help them with their effectiveness.
Have you come across anything yourself with your officers where you've had to tear apart a car?
I have, yeah, personally on a vehicle stop a couple times. Again, it wasn't something that I was, one of my greatest talent, but I do remember a vehicle stop. This was many, many years ago. And just to me, all the indicators were there that something wasn't right, but I couldn't find it. So it took, and we have to be careful with how long we're detaining someone. If we haven't increased our level of suspicion, we have to be able to articulate why we're holding somebody on the side of the road. But everything there seemed to me like it didn't make sense. It wasn't right. His story didn't add up, but I couldn't find the drugs, right? And I couldn't get a canine on scene either. I think it was a Super Bowl Sunday, if I remember correctly. And but through just not giving up and continued searching, I finally found kind of a soft part of the floorboard that didn't seem natural. It was kind of spongy. It had been epoxied over and spray painted over to match. And so, took the chance and poked a hole through that right into a Tupperware container full of meth. But agents who are really good at that, they would have probably been able to figure it out faster than it took me to figure it out at that moment. And so they just get good at it from repetition.
Oh, wow. You'd have to, because you'd have to be able to just read people, because you have to read the people first before you just kind of randomly start. You have to have probable cause, right? Before you start randomly investigating.
Yeah, and certainly if you're gonna start cutting open parts of their vehicle, like, we should be right, and because if we're not, the government's going to pay for the damages to their vehicle. But
we're going to cut your frame in half, and hopefully we're right.
Yep. Well, we wouldn't do that unless we had probable cause, which is a high level of suspicion, enough suspicion to arrest them. But
That's when you got to involve God. Go by feelers.
Well, then you have, outside of vehicles, you have the mules, right? So you have mules too, and I'm sure that's more on your guys' side because the mules are coming across the border in between the patrol points. So what are you seeing mule-wise where people are trying to get stuff in backpacks or swallowing stuff or whatever it is that they're trying to do to get stuff across?
yeah, we don't see a whole lot of it here in San Diego. I mean, certainly we have over the years. Marijuana was a big cash crop for the Sinaloa cartel. So we used to see a lot of that back through. I think, once many of the states started decriminalizing marijuana, that's when the cartels shifted to mass meth production and started pumping meth into the country at just massive volumes, unfortunately. And so during my time in Tucson and then even out in Yuma, Arizona, in the Sonoran Desert, you will see more of the backpackers backpacking drugs. And we do as well from time to time here, just not as frequently.
Yeah. And then obviously the most dangerous drug out there is fentanyl, and they're lacing it in everything nowadays. What's your experiences with fentanyl, and what have you seen?
So we typically see it in pill or powder form, packaged in small containers, dozens of bundles like that. We have tools that help us test it without having to touch it ourselves. We try to be real careful not to have our agents and officers exposed to that because it is dangerous. But we're seeing those numbers trend down a little bit on the fentanyl side because I think U.S. government as a whole has put a tremendous amount of pressure on preventing precursors from getting into Mexico, precursors from getting into the U.S., tremendous amount of effort on the cartels to stop producing and pushing fentanyl. That being said, we're still seeing it. It's just we're seeing those numbers go down and we're seeing cocaine rise significantly.
What kind of numbers are you talking? I mean, during Obama, Biden, how high was the fentanyl seizures and what you saw come across versus now? What are real numbers?
I don't have those numbers right.
Throw us a guesstimate.
I can tell you, like, we had 11,000 pounds of meth that we seized last year, so that's FY25. Coming up on 2,000 pounds of meth this year. And during that time frame, I'll just tell you.
Well, even that's significant, going from 11,000 down to 2,000.
Yeah, there was a couple significant sized loads that we got that it led to those numbers. You'll see much higher numbers at the ports of entry. Our partners down at OFO at San Ysidro and Otay Mesa, they're seizing larger amounts because that's where the majority of that stuff is coming in. It's through the ports of entry.
Are you seeing it out on ships and vessels too, trying to come around the?
We have in the past. This year, I think we've only had one working with all our partners. There's only been one load of narcotics that we've discovered, about 500 pounds of meth. We have seen that before. This year, we haven't seen as much of the narcotics coming through the ocean. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but we just haven't detected it as much or come across those loads as much. There you go, Turtle Beach Station.
Yeah, so everybody sees this all over the internet, and they're like, well, why aren't people just kind of walking around the end of that fence and just coming into the country? So
Right.
what's the story behind this fence? Why is it that exact distance out into the water, and what are you seeing trying to come around that?
I believe that's just likely that, unless it's low tide right there in that image, I believe the current fence goes out a little bit further than that. But yeah, absolutely, they swim around that fence. They got about a mile and a half. It's essentially what it looks like. You know, that one's definitely older. We've gone through a number of different evolutions where we have an anti-climb feature on the top of it now. But like you said, they can, if you probably know how to swim if you're going around that fence. And so they'll get around that and then try swimming north. We have cameras, technology to detect that.
How often does it happen where people are just going to just trudge around the end of it?
Well, it's dropped dramatically this year. The number of people trying has dropped, but I would say, you know, at least a couple times a month we have people trying it. And then when inclement weather comes in, if it's foggy, they'll try because they believe we're not able to see them in the fog. But of course, we have other technology that helps us detect them. And so we'll follow them along the beach line until they try to come out of the water, or we'll work with the Coast Guard or Air and Marine Operations to go pick them up in the surf line if it's safe to do so. But yeah, that's something that they do try.
So during past administrations, how many people would make it around that?
I'd say that, you know, if we're going back to just the most recent last administration, they didn't really need to do stuff like that because they could just
Walk right over.
Walk right over.
Yeah, and so that's what I kind of say is that, you know, we've built over decades the infrastructure, the agents, the technology, the capabilities that we've built have been born out of necessity. It wasn't something we just came up with for fun. You know, it came because of the volume of criminal activity that the cartels were engaged in. Like every square inch of border in San Diego sector has been exploited by the cartels. We used to have a barbed wire fence, then we built an 8-foot landing mat fence, then we built a 12-foot fence, then an 18-foot fence. Now we have a 30-foot fence. We have lighting, cameras, paved border roads. All the stuff we built was to try to exceed the capabilities of the cartels so that we could provide for the common defense of America. When you allow people to break that law and not be held accountable, it really renders everything that we built ineffective. And so that's what we experienced. Now we're kind of back in the game of it's very helpful. The fence, the infrastructure, it does help. It slows people down. It deters them from making that decision in the first place. It gives us the time to respond. You know, when I started, they used to do a lot of this cat and mouse. They'd send multiple groups at a time. You'd go chase one group, they run back south, easily run back south from New Mexico, and then another group runs past you. So in agents, it was very difficult to do our job like that. Now with the infrastructure we have, they can't do that. If they climb and commit to illegally entering, they're committed. They're not easily able to go back south. We also used to have vehicles that would drive through the border on a daily basis, filled with marijuana, filled with people. They could just drive into the country unimpeded. Those days are over because of the infrastructure that we built, because of the fencing, the barriers. You can't do that anymore. And you know, we've had agents killed in the line of duty over the years at the hands of the cartels, and if we had what we have now today in terms of infrastructure, those may have been preventable, right? So the environment for our agents right now is safer than it's ever been for them to patrol and carry out this mission.
Well, next question. Trump was really proud of how they designed this fence. Did they have some of this style fence in your area?
Yeah, that image does look like the the latest fence design. That the other picture was an older. You can tell that's a shorter fence. Those were older fence designs there. But if you go back to, yeah, so that's the newer fence design. It's a 30-foot high fence with a anti-climb feature on the top.
So
That
legitimately,
top-
how effective is it? I mean, how?
Well, don't get me wrong. You could still climb it, right? I mean, they'll build a rebar ladder or a rope ladder and try to climb it. But it's super dangerous. It takes some time. Once they've committed to that, if our agents are going to interdict them, they're not going to be able to quickly scale that and run back into Mexico. They're committed into the U.S. at that point. They do try to cut it. We have technology that we're rolling out that allows us we can tell if they're cutting it, if they're climbing. It's not just a physical barrier. It has technology embedded with that border wall system.
One of the things that they were mentioning during the process of designing that is Border Patrol wanted to be able to see through it, which is why they made it flat. So if it was just a plain flat steel wall, would you think that'd be harder to climb, or how important it is to see through that?
It allows us to see threats that are approaching. We need to be able to see what's approaching the fence with the intent to enter. The capabilities of the smugglers to they're pretty capable. I mean, if you build a 40-foot fence, they're going to build a 40-foot ladder, right? So they're going to continue to try to defeat whatever it is that we put out there. What we have was the most efficient design, cost-effective design, hard to cut through. It takes some time to cut through it, but it's not like you're going to have a system that's like 100%.
Oh, no system's going to be 100%, but this seems to be pretty effective, and you guys are pretty adamant on being able to see through it. We're just curious to know how effective that is on helping prevent stuff.
There's also an element too, like where we can't impede the flow of water back and forth between the countries because of the International Boundary and Water Commission. It's a binational treaty with Mexico. And so there's storm drains that flow from Mexico into the U.S. where we have to apply grate systems to it. So there's some complexities to the barrier requirements that we have established along the border.
We always see images like this one between San Diego and Tijuana. I mean, how close are actual structures between the San Diego side and the Tijuana side, of like buildings, homes?
Yeah, this is a great picture. So this is on top of an area that we call Whiskey 9, which I know that's not going to mean anything to the public, but that's our Border Patrol terminology for this section of border. And this is about 20 years ago, give or take. This is old landing mat style fencing here that you have. It's about an 8-foot high fence that was made out of Vietnam era surplus landing mat fence. This was our first shot at building a barrier to slow down the hundreds and thousands of people who used to cross in this area that you're showing here in the 80s and 90s. This area was completely out of control in the 80s and 90s. This green section here is the Tijuana River flowing from Mexico, from Tijuana into the U.S. And it's also right by the San Ysidro port of entry there. So you can see north of that green area there is some urban housing. There's some housing there. This has expanded drastically since then. There's a outlet mall there. There's more development and housing. But it's not a long
Mexican
distance.
side, right? There's pretty significant development, right?
Yes, Tijuana has grown considerably as well. I mean, the Tijuana region is developed up against the fence for the entirety of the city for the most part. Yeah, this on the other side of the port looking back westbound.
Yeah, this is your guys' 50-lane border there.
Yeah. So this, I like this image because, I joined the Border Patrol in 2000, right? September 1st, 2001 changed a lot for our country, for the world, led to the establishment of the Department of Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection, merged Border Patrol with Customs. But after 9/11, if you guys remember, then Prime Minister Tony Blair said something that always stuck with me. He said, you can measure a country by how many want in and how many want out.
Yes.
And I always thought that picture that you just showed kind of is a good analogy for that.
Yeah, very good analogy. So going back to the initial question, so I mean, distance-wise, are there structures on the Tijuana side that are like within feet of the border, 20 feet of the border?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are they building like right up to the border on their side?
There's typically a little bit of buffer. When we were building out the newest border wall, there were actually some structures that had been there for years that actually encroached into the United States. And so we had to work with Mexico to tell those property owners, like, hey, you got to cut your building off because it's in the U.S. There was a couple of situations like that. But,
really? Like a corner of a building had to get...
Yeah, just remove like a back wall, shorten the size of their house because they actually had built, construction into the U.S. But there's places in San Diego, Tijuana, in Calexico, Mexicali, in Nogales, Arizona, Nogales, Sonora, that are right up against, very close. You got about, a 10 foot wide border road, and then you have U.S. houses, and then so there are sections like that where they predate. Some of those lands predate the Roosevelt easement that established some federal land on the immediate border. Because, you think about Texas, the majority of Texas is divided by the Rio Grande. For Arizona and California, it's mostly land border, with the exception of the Colorado River in Yuma County that divides Arizona and Baja California.
So you'll have like actual residences and dwellings like just right up to the borderline then.
Pretty darn close, yep.
On our side, are we creating a buffer there where we're trying to get buildings off the border, or do we still have buildings like right on the border on our side?
We have the Roosevelt easement, which is about 60 feet of land that is established for the majority of the land border. Not every single parcel was included with that. There are some parcels that predate that. It was in the early 1900s with private land ownership. And so those are unique challenges over the years. We've purchased some of that land or attained some of that land as government property, but there still exist some pieces of land that are not owned by the federal government that go right up to the line itself.
Wow.
I was saying those type of areas would be a lot easier to build tunnels, right?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the terrain, but you look at mining capabilities and things like that the capabilities exist, and the cartels certainly have the finances and resources to do it. So we're growing in our technology to detect those things through seismic detection and other mechanisms, where we have been successful in using technology to detect sophisticated tunnels within the last couple of years.
Yeah, there's got to be LiDAR or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's one of the capabilities.
How long was that tunnel you guys discovered? How long was that?
A little over 1,900 feet.
1,900 feet. I mean, that's...
Long, correct. It's about 55 feet deep.
Oh, it's 55 feet under the ground?
Correct.
Whoa.
That is down there.
They built a nice stair system into it too. Like in the past, we would see a vertical shaft with ladders. This one, they actually built stairs, a pretty nice stair system to walk.
55 feet under the ground. They were really trying to make it so this was not detectable. And 1,900 feet long?
Correct. We've seen them up to 8 feet deep as well.
Why don't we just blast it?
I mean, that's 6.5 or so, almost 7 football fields long.
Yeah. Yep. It's long. They spend a lot of time and effort building those things, and safety is a big part of it. For us to go down into those tunnels and inspect them after they're discovered, we have a confined space entry, highly trained team that's capable of assessing whether it's structurally sound enough to enter, whether there's enough air, oxygen, ventilation, and then we use the safest mechanism possible to remediate it.
And these are all their lighting systems. So Mexico has the power turned on, and these tiles were left in here because these were the tiles that they had on the surface. Here's one of the things that we just left. These are the tools that they're using to break in and out of stuff. This is what they actually use to actually poke and kind of carve their way through these little areas. This is almost like a cemented sandstone, so it's pretty solid. This is where their vent system starts, and we just tapped into it with the U-line, and we ran our own air, so it supplied clean air throughout the whole entire tunnel. And so what you see here with these 90-degree turns is them trying to correct themselves to get back to be able to get to the location that they want to come up from. And now we're going to come up on the second set of stairs, and this is the steep set. And again, rather than gradually coming up, which is what they've done in the past, this is like a gradual kind of like a, I guess you could say, just a hill. They decided to tier it and put steps in it. And so this is the second set. This is basically the third set that comes down to the actual location of where the railing ends, basically. 1,064 feet is from the tunnel exit all the way to the U.S.-Mexico border.
So they would put that structure at risk if they tried to blast through the concrete seal that you did.
Potentially, yeah. We have seen them tunnel again next to our remediated tunnels, like using that concrete fill as shoring for, say, one side of a new tunnel.
They're not being stupid.
Innovative.
Being stupid. Well, let's get back to like stories. I mean, we've done a lot of descriptions and stuff like that, and let's end this here for the last minute or two. Stories. What people want to hear stories, like live stories. What you've experienced, what people have said to you. Give us some real legitimate stories.
I mean, we've, drive-throughs, those used to be pretty exciting back in the day. I mean, pretty dangerous type of work. But
Well, describe them.
What's a drive-through?
yes, the drive-through is when they drive a vehicle across the border loaded with people or drugs, right? And so in the times where we didn't have the border infrastructure, which was not that long ago, right? 10, 15 years ago, and even less in some areas where there's no fence whatsoever, a vehicle can just drive through the desert. I remember they even made a video game about it. It's called Smuggler's Run, where it was the desert, vehicles driving through the desert and Border Patrol chasing those vehicles. That's what it kind of used to be like. And then even after we built, like a landing mat fence that was made out of that Vietnam era landing mat fence, the smugglers would cut an entire panel down, put hinges on it, and open it up like a gate and drive a vehicle through. So when we would develop intelligence like that, we would work specialized operations to set up for those type of events and prepare for the smuggling event to happen with teams ready to take it down, interdict the vehicle, with some of our, when I was with the Border Patrol Tactical Unit, BORTAC, we would work those operations, the more high risk operations. And you just see the capability of the cartels, the crews that they bring in to cut a fence, drive a van loaded full of drugs, and then have other vehicles from the U.S. come into the area quickly to try to help that smuggling event out, get away from us. So taking those loads down were, just good, rewarding events. And then out in Arizona, they would put camouflage over the trucks, driving miles and miles through the desert. They would try to hide their tire sign, hide in the mesquite brush, hide from our air support from, doing aerial patrols, taking those vehicles down as well. Those were pretty rewarding events. Tracking groups via helicopter is pretty rewarding. You can make up a lot of time that way. When you think about 80 miles of tracking a group on foot.
You guys got to be integrating drone technology now too, right?
Now, yes, absolutely. Nowadays, we have a number of different drone. We call them SUAS, small unmanned aerial systems. That we use. Those are really helpful. The cartels are also using them. They use them to do counter surveillance on us. To look, back in the day, they'd be up on a mountaintop with binoculars and radios, radioing to each other. They still do some of that, but more often now they're using drones to do that counter surveillance.
Well, give us more stories of like personal family interdictions from other countries. Give us a vision of, I mean, terrorist organizations like actual Middle East terrorist organizations coming across. What are you seeing story-wise from people coming across?
Yeah, I'd say, like the environment after 9/11, like if you would have thought, like if someone from Al-Qaeda had illegally entered the country back then, it would have been, just, it wasn't happening, right? That was the general consensus back then, was that the cartels would not smuggle that type of person because it would bring too much heat on them. Where you fast forward to like 2023, where we had people from all over the world illegally entering, and from 147 different countries, people illegally entered here at San Diego sector in 2023, 2024. And so during that time, there were people with known ties to or membership in terrorist organizations that had illegally entered. We arrested them. The system worked in the sense that our databases were connected. We're able to work with FBI, the intelligence community, military intelligence to identify people that had concerning records and ensure that they were held in custody and removed. But we also had people that we identified as being associated with terrorist organizations just by our own agents talking to them, interviewing them, looking at their cell phones, things like that. And so that's a huge reminder that the threats to our country are very real, very persistent.
Well, how many gotaways do you think got away from terrorist organizations?
That would be a big unknown, but statistically, you have to look at the likelihood is high, because we tracked 82,000 gotaways in FY23, 82,000 people that illegally entered that we didn't catch, so we didn't run their fingerprints, anything like that. They just got away from us because we weren't able to get out and patrol proactively. This year, those numbers are far fewer. We may have a couple people a day that might get away from us, and we're able to use our investigative capabilities to work to track them down. But I think the point there is that the threat is very real. I think since our nation's founding, there have always been entities out there that wish to do harm to our country. And
would it be a legitimate comment to say we have terrorists in country right now that have gotten away or in border?
I think it is safe to say that, but I can also say that all the information that we have, that we've collected, we work very closely with the FBI, with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. When we've come across information of someone with known ties or connections, that entity, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, is really good about tracking those folks down wherever they land, whether it's New York or anywhere in the country, and bring them into custody. But I can't say here. I think you have to look at the statistics and recognize that there are threats within our country that exist.
Like you gave us the one story of the mother and father with a child in the back on the car seat. Do you have any like one or two stories like that where you personally interdicted with somebody where you have like that personal interaction with?
There's hundreds upon hundreds. I mean, every human smuggling group that we come across has some element of vulnerability for the most part for the people who are being smuggled. And so you hear their stories time and time again.
But the public does it. I mean, it's kind of normal for you guys, but nobody hears these stories. Give us some specifics of at least one or two specific stories that you can think of.
Yeah, I wasn't there for this because in the last several years I've been in less in the field and more in a management position as a chief or deputy.
That's perfectly okay.
But I talk to the agents and I read the reports and see what they're seeing out in the field. And out in Ajo in 2023, they had a young 15-year-old girl and her 16-year-old brother died up in the mountains, abandoned by their smugglers. Our agents responded, but it takes hours to get out to these locations. It takes hours and hours to get out there. We'll get out there via air support if we can, but then we got to try to find them, pinpoint them, and just super rugged and remote areas. And that's just one case. But that's
exactly what the public needs to hear is that's one case. You got 15 or 16-year-old kids that died out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, give us one or two more examples like that.
It's far too frequent to give specifics, you know, especially during that time. You know, just here in San Diego, just last week, we had to rescue an individual who was down from heat exhaustion up in Otay Mountain, abandoned by the smugglers. We had to call in air support and hoist him out. So one of our Border Patrol search, trauma, and rescue, our 4-star team, they're highly trained in advanced medical. They can deploy medical capabilities in the field. So these guys went out there, hoisted the person up, hoisted them out of the area with a helicopter to get them medical support. That was just last week. So that this stuff does happen pretty frequently. I'll tell you, you know, I guess recent type stuff. I went out, when I was in Yuma, took a team up to Las Vegas to help out with making some arrests up there with people who had gotten away from us over the years. You know, arrested one individual. Nothing special or unique about this individual, but he told us, yeah, I crossed about 6 years ago. I had to pay the cartel $6,000. I had to pay them $800 a week out of my paycheck. I worked doing construction, handyman type stuff, day labor type work. So, you know, nothing, it's not, you know, anything unique about that story. I think that is the case with the vast majority of the people who are smuggled in. That's what happens. They have a fee, they make it into the United States. You know, there's often a sentiment with these folks that, like, hey, they're just trying to make a better living. They're working hard, and there's some truth to that. Maybe, yeah, they're just trying to make a better living, but they're doing it outside of our nation's laws. They're undermining legitimate businesses, right? They're not paying the same wages that our country requires. They were smuggled in by the cartels. They're paying money back to the cartels. And that story is duplicated thousands and thousands of times over throughout our entire country.
Being held ransom at $800 a week doesn't sound like a better life to me.
What's what's the story behind your Thor hammer?
I thought
that was a gift. I appreciate you asking that. I served up in headquarters back in 2022 as a deputy chief of operations, and the team, when I left there, the team got that for me. Those were pretty difficult times for us, right? Coordinating with the Department of Homeland Security, the White House, trying to get resources to help our agents out in the field who were going through some pretty challenging times.
So what does the Thor hammer represent then?
I think they just thought it looked cool. They're like, hey, it's cool. But it was a cool gift, and since you asked, I got to talk about the American flag behind me. So this is my mom quilted this for me.
Oh, really?
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was made from my uncle's Hawaiian shirts. My uncle was like a second father to me. He was a retired Army veteran during the Vietnam War and retired San Diego police officer. Passed away a couple of years back, and my mom quilted that for me. So it's very near and dear to my heart.
That's very special.
Very special there. Very special. I also see you got a section of the fence back there too.
Yeah, let me see. That piece, that was a gift from the folks out in Yuma sector. When I left Yuma sector, they crafted that for me. They're very appreciative for that.
Well,
ICE has social media sites, at least on Instagram and Facebook, where they, on a daily and weekly basis, post accomplishments, vignettes of arrests and things like that to make the public more aware. Does Border Patrol do something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Each sector has our own social media account, and then our headquarters has an account. But for San Diego sector, it's USBP Chief SDC, or it might be SDC USBP Chief. But we're on Instagram, Facebook, X. I believe they may or may not be working on getting a TikTok account at some point. But
That's rough.
we are heavily on social media, and as a sector, we do post quite a bit here in San Diego. We try to post once a day if we can. We show both the operations on the border, and we also show the arrests that we're making in the interior of the United States for people who've gotten away from us. I know a lot of people ask questions like, hey, why would you arrest that person if they don't have a criminal record? And again, we go back to, we have to prevent the smuggling from happening to begin with. We have to prevent, so it's in law enforcement, the goal is to change human behavior, right? I think most Americans can relate to, let's say, a speeding ticket, or maybe even driving under the influence, things that perhaps people can understand, like, hey, that's something I might have done. Certainly I have sped before, and I've been held accountable for it by ways of a ticket. And I don't like having to pay $300 fine. So that's enough to make me not want to speed or break the law. We all know people who've been arrested for driving under the influence. It doesn't make that person, a horrible person. It's not a moral judgment. It's simple accountability for the protection of the public, right? We want our law enforcement doing that, because if people are driving recklessly, dangerously, endangering the lives of others, if they're driving under the influence, endangering the lives of others, that's dangerous for the public. The same holds true for us, except the difference with the border security mission is that people are willing to risk their lives to come here. We hear this time and time again. I talk to people about, like I talked to the young family, why would you do this, right? They're willing to risk their lives. They know that it's dangerous. People know that people have been sexually assaulted by the cartel. It's not a secret that the word of mouth is out there. They know it's dangerous, and they're willing to risk their life, because the reason they're willing to risk their lives is because they think there's a chance of success. And if you look back historically for decades in our country, they have been successful. They've been able to illegally come here, work here, and not be held accountable. So the only way we stop this is by having a very, very high level of accountability, to where people know that why would you risk your life? Why would you pay $10,000 to the cartel when I'm going to get arrested one way or the other and sent back? That's what we have established now, and we're working to establish that even more so. Like you mentioned, there's millions of people in the country who are here illegally, who are vulnerable, being exploited by businesses who are not doing it the right way. I would say that things like E-Verify are not yet a federal requirement. That's a very easy way to make sure that you're hiring somebody who has a legal right to be in the country, to work in the country. There's 24 states in the union who do require E-Verify. I hope that it will be a federal requirement at some point. That's something for Congress to decide. Certainly not my place. But things like that, where we can encourage the public to adhere to federal law and not do things that encourage all the despair that comes with human smuggling, right? It's not placing a moral judgment on somebody who wants to make a better living. It's simply holding people accountable to our nation's laws.
Thank you. I think it's important that that's spelled out, because unfortunately in this time, a lot of the public is ignorant to almost everything that you said.
And a lot of the public resists getting rid of the incentives, like you're saying. I mean, even in our own state here in Utah, they were trying to get rid of any incentives to go into illegals, whether that's Medicare, or not Medicare, but Medicaid, food stamps, which they're getting a lot of, driver's license incentives, where they're even trying to take some incentives away from adults, but still giving incentives to the kids, which is just incentivize parents to bring their kids across. There's a lot of pushback on just getting rid of the incentives. And if we don't get rid of the incentives, we're not going to get rid of the illegal immigration. And that's just kind of way.
And most of the uninformed public, to just the bleeding heart, good heart people, you're just being mean.
They mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges in it, right? Like our form of government, beautiful system of government that we have, states, having the ability to create their own unique laws. Some of these laws do encourage and enable this type of crime from happening. It's unfortunate, but that's the position that those states have taken. Having, you talk about the public not knowing about this. It's true, and had I not spent my entire adult life focused on this mission, I probably would not know about it either. So I'm committed to trying to talk about it as much as possible, share this information. I'm sharing it from a place of passion and wanting to get truthful information out. It's not a political statement by any means. We're trying to be as apolitical as possible and just focus on what we swore an oath to do, which is to provide, for the common defense of the American people and to serve the common good of the American people. That is what our the preamble of our Constitution starts with. Obviously, I'm a proponent of a strong federal government that has the resources and ability to protect our country. And that's what the U.S. Border Patrol is committed to doing.
Well, we appreciate everything you're doing, and we appreciate your family for all that they do to allow you to sacrifice for us.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, greatly appreciated. Tell all your men over there that they're loved, they're appreciated. It's not like, well, most of us hopefully are loving and appreciating all our law enforcement and those that kind of stick their life on the line, but those who protect our border and get rid of the fentanyl, because that's one of the biggest causes of death here in the United States right now is the fentanyl. So everything is greatly appreciated. We lament that there's a certain half of our society that don't appreciate you guys as much and try to stop you from doing what you're there to do and call you names, throw stuff at you, all that kind of stuff. We see that on the news all the time, and we can't really apologize on their behalf, but the rest of us do appreciate what you guys are doing now and respect your guys' desire to serve the public.
Yeah, if I can just thank you guys as well. This conversation cannot be had in a 5-minute interview with traditional media. It really requires a longer discussion. And so I appreciate you guys taking the time to chat with me for a couple hours about it.
Well, we are definitely long format. Yeah, we're definitely long format. The full thing goes up, and then we'll do clips of it. So you'll see the full thing coming up here real soon, and everybody gets a full picture. There's no cutting this thing up. There's no chopping it up for snippets or sound bites or trying to make it sound different than what it really is. And there's none of that. This is reality on the ground.
And I'll find your media sites and tag those in there.
Yeah, and we'll see if we can put links to your social media up there so people can see your videos going out there and additional information what's going on the ground out there. And if anything big happens, anything news media, we would greatly appreciate it if you sent us a little snippet of what's going on out there, and we'll try to get it out there even further.
Anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you guys.
All right. Thanks you for your time, and we'll talk to you next time.
God be with you.
Likewise. Take care. Hope y'all have a good weekend.
You too. That is this episode of God and Country. We appreciate everybody being on board. I would highly recommend that you go onto their social media sites and click on the videos. I mean, we were trying to get some stories out of them, but you could tell that they don't want to talk about it, right? It's like getting a soldier to talk about what they saw in theater. It's traumatic. And I think it's more traumatic than many of us realize. I mean, my own grandfather, I tried to get him to talk about his war experiences during World War II, and he wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't talk about it. I got a brother-in-law who's a highway patrol officer, and there's a lot of stuff that he doesn't want to talk about. He doesn't want to relive those type of experiences. And he talks about this young 19, 20-year-old family with a brand new baby on the back. I'm sure that's probably one of the most minor experiences that he has gone through. I'm positive he's seen some pretty horrific things. And Tom Holland, he's a little more bold and tells horrific experiences that he's seen because he wants the public to understand that. So I would highly recommend you get up onto their social media and see some of the real life stuff. And then also understand in the back of your mind that they see some really, really horrific things, because we did not get into more detail about rape, about the cartels literally just raping kids, clear down to 9, 10-year-old girls are getting raped coming across the border. We know that is happening. There's a lot of child sex trafficking going on. Small boys are getting raped. Don't think it's just the girls. All the women have very, very high likelihood of getting raped coming across the border. It's the abuse of the money. It's getting them to where they are required to pay these bills for years and years and years because they just can't make enough money here in the United States to pay all that back. And then on threat of getting deported again and that all going to vain, it's it's safer for all parties involved that border is shut down. To see the differences between the two administrations is astronomical, from maybe a couple getting across the border now to where they literally had 20, 30,000 a day coming across the border during the Biden administration. That is insane numbers. Where the Border Patrol were no longer Border Patrol, but just clerical people just processing paperwork and just letting people through. I mean, that's essentially what it boils down to, because they wanted millions to come across the border to dilute our system here and get them registering and voting. And you can't tell us that that's not what they're doing. They're getting all those illegals.
And to cause them to feel so failed in their purpose that committing suicide.
Yeah. And I have my brother's wife's brother committed suicide. He was Border Patrol, because just horrific stuff. And they said they had 20 others committing suicide, and it's based off of a mixture of two things. It's the horrific things we're seeing on the border mixed with how the public treated them. I mean, we saw that during the Vietnam era, when soldiers are coming back from the Vietnam War, they're called child killers, and public just lost all respect for our soldiers, and it's not their fault. We're seeing the same type of attacks against our ICE agents, our Border Patrol agents, when they're humane, they're doing the right thing, they're taking care of people, they're trying to take people out of bad situations, save lives, give money out of their own pockets, toys out of their own pockets to help people out. But despite all that, these people have to go back to their own countries. I mean, there's a process to come across where they learn to appreciate this country. They're just not crossing. It's not feasible for us to intake that many people, to have a flood of people. It's not migration, it's an invasion, right? When you have that many people come.
Well, and we're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Most of our viewers understand this very well. It's just frustrating that you have the campaign to indoctrinate people
Smear campaign,
about it. So
mainstream media campaigns to
for every video I bet that those Border Patrol put out on their side, there's probably 10 to their one spinning it.
I'd like to see their comment section too. And they're probably not being nice to those Border Patrol agents either in their comment section. I don't know.
When I look at ISIS, the majority is supportive, but then again, probably the majority that know it's out there and are following it.
Well, the ICE could be deleted, the negative ones too.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But
Deleted.
it gives you hope watching it.
Well, we greatly appreciate everybody being on board. Watch the full podcast. Again, like, subscribe, and share. We need your help, both on YouTube as well as all our social media sites. Get that out there for us. Again, down below is our t-shirt. Support the channel, and we'll see everybody on the next video.